Hello, everyone, and welcome to LeeLa. I'm Lee Philbrook. It's going to be a super fun show this evening. We're going to start off with a short background on us, your hosts, followed by an opening intention. And we're super excited for our special guest, George MacNabb, who will be talking about communicate with confidence. And this is our part two. And it's really vocal power and clarity, followed by some questions, and then our closing intentions and final announcements. So here we go. Over to my co-host, Lisa English. Lisa?
Thanks so much, Lee. Welcome to LeeLa, everyone. This is a place where we hope to inspire you all to live a congruent and intentional life. It's also a place where you can play, have fun, learn, and explore. I'm a teacher, a content creator for small businesses, and an entrepreneur. And really, with my content creation, I help all these small businesses navigate the digital world we're all living in right now, whether that's via Zoom, online marketing platforms, or social media. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it back over to my co host, Lee Philbrook. Lee?
Thanks. The mission of the LeeLa community is to transform conversations and practices into actions that make a difference. And LeeLa means in Sanskrit, divine or creative play. And this evening, I really encourage you to take the opportunity to participate and play with George. A little bit about me. I'm a Reiki master, a cranial sacral therapist, a master practitioner of NLP and hypnotherapy. And NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, is like learning the language of the mind. It's kind of like getting the owner's manual to your mind. I often hear the phrases, I wish things were different, or I feel stuck in the circumstances of my life. And I notice that these individuals are not able to make long lasting changes, or they just continue to express why things don't work. The tools and techniques that I employ with my clients create sustainable shifts, and they're really living their best lives. I'd now like to do an opening intention, and this really connects us and holds the space for this evening. So please close your eyes. May divine grace surround us, uphold us, and cherish us all. May it support us and our sacred trust and community. May we be strong together and our journeys be brighter and higher for having walked side by side. May we be guides for others and ourselves with clarity, tenderness, and light, feeling gentle in our minds and clear with our words, being strong in our creations, sending peace in all directions of time. With gratitude, we take this moment to arrive and join together. Open your eyes. Welcome to the room. Now over to Lisa to introduce our special guest. Lisa?
George MacNabb has been in the broadcast industry in Toronto for over 30 years. After graduating from Ryerson University, he hosted and performed in a variety of television and radio programs, as well as voiceovers and film. In 1977, he joined the CBC as a radio and television announcer. Over the years, George has hosted a variety of programs and read news and traffic reports. George has taught communication skills at Seneca, Centennial, George Brown Colleges, as well as University of Toronto and Ryerson. He created MacNabb Enterprises in 1986 to present his unique package of presentation and speaking skills. Since then, he has trained hundreds of corporate managers and company employees. George says the voice is the most powerful tool a person can have as a presenter. It is now my pleasure to pass the floor over to our special guest, George MacNabb.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? What a wonderful evening it is. My heavens, I didn't know I was going to open this way at all. It's one of those things where you do something once and you think it'll come back on you again. Well, here it came back to haunt me. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because there are some people in the group tonight who didn't see my opening presentation. And that creates the conversation, which is everybody's listening to expecting a certain sound to come out of me based on my background. I throw out something totally different, but what it does is it gets attention with the audience. In other words, they go, "That's not him. Who is that guy? Is he joking on me?" But it gets people's attention. So in your own life, when you're doing presentations, if you can get something like that to create some fun in the audience, and people will start to enjoy your presentations from the very beginning, believe me. And this happened to me. I'll tell you the story. It was in a corporate executive room, 20 or 30 people. They were out partying the night before. They were in at 8:30 in the morning. I looked out over the room and I said, my God, half these people are dead. How am I going to wake them up? Years ago, I used to play the role of Barney Rubble in the Fred Flintstone Roadshow on theater and acting. And I thought, every time the kids would come by, I'd do a, "Hey, Fred, how you doing? I'm doing fine." And I do this silly little voice. And I thought, and I'm listening to this person introducing me in the corporate room. And I thought, boy, these people are so dead. I got to wake them up somehow. So she finished, and George thinks the voice is the most beautiful thing you should ever have, and la, and the most gorgeous thing that'll come out of your body, blah, blah. And I went in and did this. "Hi, everybody. How you doing? Well, you know what? Today we're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to jump trees." And everybody's lying there half dead, and they go, "What's going on up in front of the room? This can't be true. Am I in a corporate room? No, no. Is this guy joking on me?" So I played the question and answer thing. I said, "All right, how many of you thought this was a joke?" And a few people put their hands up. "How many of you thought it was real?" And they said, "Oh God, no, I got to spend 8 hours with this guy in a room with that voice." And as it progressed, at the end of the day, this one guy came up who was actually a comedian who did comedy at night, but he worked in the corporate world as a financial advisor in the daytime. And he came up and said, "You know what? That was the best opening ever." He said, "I was ready to die, and you woke me up, and all day long I paid attention because I wanted to hear what you had to say." And so that was a reminder of, we're so used to the openings of, "Oh, here's our guest speaker," and blah, blah, blah. And "Thank you very much for that kind introduction." And we have these routines. And sometimes it's better to break the routine up, but you got to check your audience. You got to make sure you're doing it for a right group of people. Anyway, I just want to go over some of the things we discussed last time in session 1, just to get everybody back into speed. First, let's start the diaphragmatic breathing. So you remember the hand on the chest, the hand on the diaphragm. We took a breath to decide what part of your body you were breathing from, either the chest or the diaphragm. Take a breath. All right. See what part of your body's moving. Take a breath. See if your stomach's blowing out. It should. If it's not, then your shoulders are rising. I'll demonstrate. That's a chest breath. Here's a diaphragmatic breath. What that does is it expands that muscle in your diaphragm. The diaphragm actually is a muscle. Years ago, when I was learning how to do all this stuff, way back in the 70s, I was at Ryerson. I worked with a guy who was an opera singer from Montreal. He was a wonderful man and taught me a great deal. And one of the things he taught me was this diaphragmatic breathing technique to be able to hold the sound of a note for sometimes, a minute or so. And when I was a kid, I remember lying on the bed, and probably some of you did this too. I used to lie in the bed and hold my breath for as long as I could. And I got it up to like 2 minutes, 50 seconds, 3 minutes, that kind of thing, because I liked scuba diving, but I didn't have a scuba thing. I had a snorkel. So I thought, well, this is a good way for me to develop my breathing so I can stay underwater. So it actually worked. And I was able to stay under for a long time. And I'd be under there with 5 or 6 other people, and you'd see them popping up all around me. But I'd still be under there looking at the clams and all that stuff. And it was really quite an experience. So when I came to Toronto and started learning about broadcasting and theater and film and how I have a theater director who would say, project your voice to the back of the room, 60 rows back, and make sure they can hear you. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. And it's not that we all have different voices. It's that if you learn how to use them, they will pound out that sound. It'll blow people away. And it really is that kind of thing. So I have a bunch of other techniques. Now we have the A-E-I-O-U. That's for the facial muscles. A-E-I-O-U. And do it in different formats just to have some fun with it. A-E-I-O-U, I-O-U-A-E, all that kind of silliness, and just play with it and have, these are warm-up exercises. Never, ever do a presentation without warming up. There's not a musician, an opera singer, or a classical player who's not in the background warming up and playing. I used to play in a band myself, and we used to warm up half an hour before showtime, because when you come out, you want to come out and say, we're ready to go. And it's boom, and you hit it, and you're ready to go. But if you come out warm, I'll give you a good example. It struck me this way the other day. Last week, we had that nice warm weather. I didn't warm up, and I don't warm up when I play golf. And I didn't warm up. And I'm out there and I'm hitting the ball. I can drive the ball just fine, but the rest of my game stunk. The guy I was with, my son-in-law, he warmed up for half an hour, 45 minutes, and he was better than he ever was the previous day. So all I'm saying is the warm-up just gets you into the rhythm and it gets you into the motion. It's like tonight, before we came on here, I was warming up a good half hour before I hit the microphone, because I know I have a 1 hour game to play. And in that case, I have to make sure I've got the stamina to do the whole 1 hour. And when I was doing corporate stuff, and some of you may who've done it out there will know that, my heavens, if you're doing corporate stuff, I was up in front of a room like at 9 in the morning till 5 in the evening. You know, it was a long day. And you're doing all kinds of exercises with people. And boy, at the end of the day, it was like, whoa, you were tired, even though I was in good shape and knew how to do the practicing and everything like that. So just keep that in mind. Never, ever go into a presentation without warming up, because it'll get you pumped up to a certain level and you won't feel like you're dying in the middle of the room. Of course, you may feel that anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right. So, I came up with one today. This is something for you to play. I every morning, or not every morning, but every second morning, I'll have a quiche, and they're crustless quiches. And so I started making this little rhythm called crustless quiche, crustless quiche, crustless quiche. And the way to play the game is you take a diaphragmatic breath, crustless quiche, crustless quiche, crustless quiche, and say something repeated. 3 slick ships, 3 slick ships, 3 slick ships. I used to do this in classrooms, and it got a lot of laughs, believe me. It was a lot of fun. Now, I've got a whole list of them, and you can find them, by the way, on Google, Google tongue twisters, Google whatever, Betty Batter bought some butter. I'll give you a couple of demonstrations. One breath. You got to do it in one breath, because that develops and expands your diaphragm. So here's the Betty Batter one. Betty Batter bought some butter. But said, gee, the butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. So she bought some better butter, and she put the better butter in the bitter batter and made the bitter batter better. So you do that in one breath, and sometimes you can do twice in one breath. And this is how you know you're developing your diaphragm. The hardest one is the TH sound, such as, I'll do it for you as best I can, one breath. Theophilus thithel thistle sifter sifted to sieve of unsifted thistles. If Theophilus thithel the thistle sifter sifted to sieve of unsifted thistles, where's the sieve of unsifted thistle? Theophilus thithel the thistle sifter sifted. Now that's really hard, but I practiced it and practiced it. Obviously, I didn't screw it up that time. But the point is that you're just having some fun to develop your vocal diaphragm and your enunciation, A-E-I-O-U. And when you get the muscles going in the face and the tongue, another good one is humming. Pick a song and just hum it. When I used to go to work in the morning, I had to read news at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm in the car on the lakeshore, and I'm driving along, and I'm doing all these things. And the one thing I remember mostly was the show called I Got a Tangled Mind. I've got a tangled mind. I've got a broken heart. What it does is it moves your voice up and down like a yo-yo. So any kind of a song like that, just to have some fun with it. So when I got to work, I was able to take the newscast and say, great, here's the CBC News. I'm George MacNabb. And bang, off I would go without even a thought about it. So that's something to keep in mind. The other ones were, let me see here, what do we got? Oh yeah, the fear thing. And that's where this whole conversation starts, eh? You've got a group of people out there, they're waiting to hear what you're going to say, and you're over here in your mind talking to yourself, such as, I hope I don't forget anything. I hope I don't screw up. I hope they don't judge me. Well, they're going to anyway, so it doesn't matter. Give it up. I hope this doesn't happen. I hope I can remember this or remember that or whatever. You remember the clue I gave you last time? Nobody knows what you're going to say, so you can't forget anything. They don't know. So just keep the game rolling, say what comes out of your mouth and what have you. And the purpose of the voice is if you get the voice high enough, it'll blank out any thinking that you're doing right now. Now, this is my good level for doing a presentation because I can't hear myself talk in the brain. And it's the brain and you and your mind, you're trying to avoid the conversation you're having with yourself about whether you're good, bad, or indifferent. The idea being get your voice up at that level, and then all of a sudden you become in the room. There's no barrier between you and the crowd. And then what happens is you start to shift to seeing what the audience is like, the people. And so when you're saying, hey, does anyone want to participate? You know who's going to participate because you can see the ones, because all you have to do is say this. I'm going to show you an exercise, and in a few minutes, I'm going to ask a few of you to volunteer. And you should see the room going. I don't want to do anything like that. Well, no, I hope he doesn't pick on me. So what you do is you go around the room and you look for somebody who didn't look too startled by what you said. And you say, hey, Fred, how about you? You want to come up here and we'll do this 1 to 10 exercise? Or Fred, come on up here and I'll show you a little exercise you can do with your voice. And he comes up because he wants to have some fun with you, right? And then after a while, you'll see the audience starting to relax a little more because it wasn't too dangerous. See, they don't know what you're going to do up in front of the room, so that's why they don't volunteer right away. Silence is another thing that you must learn to master because you want to keep yakking all the time because silence is deafening. You've heard that straight statement before. So silence is deafening until you get used to using it as a tool. The one thing that I'm going to demonstrate today that'll blow your mind, literally blow your mind, is this. You see how I set you up? I set you up with silence. Here's another one. My teachers used to use them, the buggers. I remember this literally today, otherwise I wouldn't be telling you this. They'd say, this is going to be on your exam. And so you get your pen out and you start writing down and everything. And then you get the damn exam and it wasn't on. What a piss off that was. Do you remember that? Oh my heavens. Drive me nuts. But anyway, that's how the teacher got your attention. Hey, this is going to be on your exam. What a great trick. And everybody participates. So I'm going to show you an example of something. And then afterwards, I'm going to have one of you come up from the room. And of course, it's same idea, same game. So you pick 2 or 3 people who are going to play. And then after a while, you start to see the room settling down. You're not as dangerous as they thought you were going to be. And so they start volunteering. And as a matter of fact, at the end, if you don't pick somebody, they're going to be so disappointed because they wanted to come up, because they finally got the nerve to be able to do it. I'll give you an example once. I used to live in Charlottetown working for CBC. And my kids were young at the time, about 4 and 6. And I went to one of the schools and I play guitar and I sing. And I created this thing about singing children's clothing. Hey there, Johnny with the red jacket on. Hey there, Mary with the blue slippers on. And I'd make up these words and sing to all the kids about their clothing. And I just came out of the top of my head and they liked it. And I do some kind of a rhythm with it. And boy, if I didn't mention one of the kids coming around the corner, if I thought I was running out of time or whatever, if I came around and what about my clothing? You didn't sing my clothing. It was remarkable. But I think as adults, we're much the same way, because if you don't pick somebody who wants to come up, it's like, oh, look, I got all the guts in the world to come up and you didn't pick me. So you have to be aware of that in a room. Say to them something like, don't worry, I'll get back to you. We'll get together shortly. Don't worry about it. It's a no big deal. Okay, so that was that. The warm-ups and the audience's fears and barriers. So you're really trying to get over that fence of your fears. You remember last time I mentioned to you, this is for you new people. When I was doing this class once, I'd have them come up in front of the room and introduce themselves and say, hey, what would you like to get out of the class? What's the one thing you'd like to learn? And they'd say, well, this, this. And I said, okay, great. Why don't you put your fear up on the board? Let's just see it. Let's make it real. So after a while, they start, I'm afraid of mispronouncing something. I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid nobody will like me. I'm afraid of, and all of a sudden, all the fears. By the time I finished with a class of about 30, there were more than 60 fears up there on the wall, on the board. And when you were able to look at it, all of a sudden, they realized that everybody was in the same boat. All it was a blackboard full of fear, but different fears. And they really got a bonding in that situation. They kind of look, gee whiz, Frank, I didn't think that you were afraid of that. You're such a brave, uncowardly guy. Oh yeah, I hate that. My mother taught me one. And boy, the stories that come out would blow your mind. Here's the story I've been wanting to tell for quite some time. I used to teach at George Brown College, and I taught a course of number 1 and number 2. Number 1 course was a beginner course, and number 2 was an advanced course, which was mostly about videotaping and showing their videotapes to the class, and then discussing what we saw and what we experienced. This one guy was doing a presentation on nuclear reactors. He was an engineer, well educated, and he was doing this presentation. He was from Vietnam, but he could hardly speak English. And I remember up in front of the room, stumbling through using the English language, trying to explain the board and what was on his flip charts and stuff like that back in those days. And after he finished, I said, that was really good, but you know what I'd like you to do? Why don't you do it in Vietnamese and see if we can understand your body language and to describe what it is that you're trying to explain to us. And all of a sudden, he just lit right up and he was so excited. And he did it in his own language. And you know what? We understood about just as much because you had the flip charts up front explaining it in English. So he really didn't need to do it in English. He did it in Vietnamese, but he was so much more open and animated that it really blew me away. And I learned a great deal from that one. So it's not so much about your language as much as your intention. And this guy just lightened right up when he said, oh, God, he's going to let me use my own language. Far out, man. I'm free now. So anyway, consider that in terms of your own presentations. All right, we're going to move on now. Let's see how my time is doing. I got my thing here that I got from my mother. Okay, Ma, we're doing okay. Part 2. It's a 1 to 10 thing. It's an exercise for developing the voice. Now we've developed the articulation with the Betty Batter, the rhythm of the voice, and the sound of the voice with the A-E-I-O-U with inflections up and down and all that, and exaggerate that stuff as much as you can. And now what we're going to do is develop a sound from, hi everybody, how you doing? What a nice evening it is, isn't it? Until I say something different. So the idea is, what kind of a range are you willing to play with in a presentation? A lot of you are afraid to move your voice around very much because you think you're being heard okay. But when you've got a room of 50 people, I've done up as many as 10,000 people in Chicago at a presentation. Not only that, I was singing, and I had to sing a cappella, "O Canada." But you know what I knew? Nobody in the audience knew the words to "O Canada," so I didn't worry about screwing it up. But I remember the room was getting ready because they played the American national anthem and everybody was getting up to leave. My father-in-law at the time was the head of this organization, and he said, this is my last year. I'd like to have somebody sing "O Canada" for once. So I said, okay, I'll sing it. So I went over to the piano player and I said, can you play this? And she tried and she couldn't get it together. I said, look, don't worry, I'll do a cappella without an instrument. So I went to the back of the stage and I went, oh, 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 and I just got the right note that I needed. And so I went out at the microphone when everybody's getting up to leave this large auditorium, almost like Maple Leaf Gardens kind of thing. And I went, oh, and you could see everybody in the room just stop. And it was wonderful. And I did the continuation, Canada, and off I went. And it was wonderful. And I was in the elevator, and I'm all dressed up in this white sport coat kind of thing with a black tie, very executive looking. And I'm in the elevator after everything was all over. And this guy said to me, you know what? That was absolutely wonderful. He says, I've never really heard "Oh Canada" before from your country. What part of Canada are you from? And again, the conversation went on. So what it did was create a conversation that they hadn't heard before. And I didn't worry about the words because I knew damn well they didn't know what they were anyway. So I could make up any words. And this brings me back to another story when I was a singer. And this is about keeping the conversation going, even though in your mind you may think you're dying. I was in a group singing about trains, and my mother was in the front row. Now, some of you check this out. I have a hard time when my parents were in the front row of my performances. I don't know why. When they weren't there, I was more free and open, and I guess they didn't want to see silly Georgie, that kind of thing. So I remember I looked down, I saw my mother, and it was my turn to sing the verse. There were three of us in the group. And I came like, big train, keep on running, and my mind went blank. I couldn't remember a word to save my soul. So all I did was make words up. That great big train is keep on running. Whoa, big train, keep on running. You're doing fine. Hit that rail, big train. And I just kept it up. But you know, nobody in the audience realized it wasn't part of the song, except my buddies who were with me looking at me with eyeballs like, what are you doing? That kind of thing, you know. But the idea here is to keep the game going. Remember, they don't know what you're going to tell them. Just tell them. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. That's the three parts of a speech. Simple as ABC. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Today, I'm going to talk about public speaking. Part two, I'm just talking to you today about public speaking. I just talked to you about public speaking. Later on in the program, I'm going to give you about a 10-minute or maybe 10 minutes worth of how to put a quick speech together. I've got a great chart here. It's I can do 150 words in 1 minute. So if you know the mathematics of putting a speech together, it's about 1,000 words for an 8-minute speech. So if you know that, you can just go bang off a speech in no time. That's for you people who, when somebody says, listen, Mary's sick today and she couldn't do the presentation. Can you do it? You're in the same office as she is. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Well, I have Mary's notes here. Why don't you just use those? So you can just whittle it off in no time and stand up and say, Mary's not here today because she's ill, but I'm here to back her up. And here's what she wanted to tell you. Off you go. Bingo, bingo. Okay, so let's start with the volume thing, as I mentioned before. Lee, are you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Now, this is an exercise on volume. So Lee is going to take me through 10. I'm going to direct her through it. And you'll get the exercise yourself on screen. And the idea here is just something to read. But it's a great way to practice this exercise. It's called the 1 to 10. So you start 1 with no inflection whatsoever, monotone. Then you add a little in 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 10 is where you let go. So in your mind, you have a certain number that you think you're going to be, shall we say, at. But in actual fact, some of you, when you do this exercise, will find that your voice is extremely low. You think you're at a 10, but you're at a 4. So anyway, okay, Lee, let's boogie woogie. Number 1, please.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. Number 2.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. Number 3.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. 4.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. Number 5.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Wait, change it. 6.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. Now, number 7 is generally classified as the normal sound that most people will use in a presentation. So do a normal presentation energy sound at 7, Lee.
Okay. Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. 8, let it go a bit more.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Okay, 9, let it go a little more.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Great. Number 10, let it go.
Oh dear, I cannot hear. Will you please come over here? Will you please look in my ear? There must be something there, I fear.
Hey! Good for you. Very good. Good fun. Now, what happened to your mind at number 10?
It's going from like 8, 9, and 10. It's to, you don't want to yell per se.
Yeah.
But how do you change that and make it crazier, louder, bigger?
Well, that's where the 10 comes in with the diaphragmatic breathing. If you take the big deep breath and let it come out, then you get to realize you can actually do this in a room. I mean, hell, if people can sing in a room and rock and roll and you name how loud they play and all that stuff, if audiences can handle that, they can certainly handle you being out of the box a little bit. But the funny part, you in your mind think you're really out of the box and what have you. And it really isn't that too much different. It's really quite fascinating. This is why some of you should record yourselves and listen to yourself. Today we have the sticks you can put on a computer. Just record yourself and listen to yourself afterwards. The hardest thing is to listen to yourself. I used to do it all the time. I had a buddy at CBC down in Master Control. He would record all of my newscasts. I'd go home the next day and I'd sit and listen to them and say, ooh, boy, that was a bad one. Mispronounced that word. And I've had some beauties over the years, but this is all part of the learning process. It's all part of what is it that is going to take for you to stand up in front of the room and be free? Be free. That's the secret. Just being able to go, I'm a home. Welcome, welcome. There was a lady in my class, I remember 25 years ago, and 10 years after she left the course, she called me and said, I finally got what you were teaching. I finally realized I'd had the experience of standing in front of a group of people and actually enjoying myself, giving them the information I wanted to share. That took her 10 years. Some people get it right away. Some people find out what their fear is, that kind of stuff. That's why you have to work on it. But you really do have to listen to yourself, because if you don't, you're not sure of what direction to go into, not to please yourself, but to make yourself sound, I guess the word professional. something like that, especially if you're teaching. It's like,
Just think if I had this voice all the time teaching public speaking, I don't think I'd last very long in the game. What do you think, Ma?
no, I don't think so. So that's the whole point of it. The whole point of it is, what is it that you can do to create a listening in the room without you blocking the ability for them to listen? Because you're the only interference. All you are is energy going into a room. And then they get the information and they take it and translate it in their own minds, and off they go into their own world. You never know where they're going to be or where they're going to show up. You have no idea. It's mind-boggling. But if you have that one little thing that you can give somebody to make their lives a little more relaxed in front of an audience, boy, I tell you. But the barriers, imagine the barriers. That's why I come back to it all the time. That's the secret. Find your fear and find out, what is it you're afraid of? What is that one thing you're afraid of? I used to get so nervous before a presentation, I'd be shaking like a leaf. And I kept asking myself, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of screwing up. I didn't want to look like a fool and all that sort of thing and blah, blah, blah. And once I got past that, I realized it wasn't that at all. I was afraid I was going to forget. I was going to forget the information that I had to pass on. I used to do commercials, and I always was afraid of walking into a commercial and forgetting the lines. My agent would call me and da-da-da-da-da. And then the day happened when it did happen. I went in for a vacuum cleaner commercial. I had the lines down pat. I was perfecto, and I started doing the presentation, but I picked the wrong vacuum cleaner. So I endorsed the vacuum cleaner that was the bad one and made the supposed one I was trying to sell the real bad one. And the producer was laughing so hard, and the director, they were on the floor. But I didn't know why they were laughing so hard until afterwards I realized, oh, wrong vacuum cleaner. This is the good one. That's the bad one. Oh, my heavens. I felt like a fool. But again, they laughed their asses off because they were having such a good time. So maybe out of that just freedom of me being insane, they learned something. Who knows? But one thing I did know is after the commercial was produced, you know what? About months later, I saw it, and it was nothing near what they said they wanted me to do. It was a totally different character, a totally different person. It was mind-blowing. And what I got was they already decided long before I hit the room. There were another 50 people out there waiting to do the audition. What a joke that was. Anyway, onward. All right, here we go. Lee, do you want to play? We played, Lee. Okay, Lisa, your turn. What we're going to do with you, Lisa, we're going to do a thing called Ozymandias, right? Now, Ozymandias is a Percy Shelley poem, and I've always liked this because it reminds me of people who are powerful in the world, and you can do your own interpretation of this, but considering the day and the times we live in, I think this is absolutely perfect. So what Lisa is going to do is just read it to me with the two different characters, and we're going to see what number of 1 to 10 she jumps to for one of the characters. Okay, Lisa, anytime you're ready.
Okie dokes. So this is Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frowned and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell its sculptor well those passions red, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
Yay! Okay, so how was it in your mind from 1 to 10? What do you think you did Ozymandias in?
Maybe a 6 or a 7?
Yeah, that's good. Right on.
Okay.
So my name is Ozymandias, you know. It's yeah, but again, you had some thoughts about it. What was your mind thinking as you were doing it, by the way?
Be loud enough.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Anything
I
else?
can show a difference
Yeah.
between the
Anything
two.
else pop into your head while you were doing it?
Sorry?
Anything else pop into your head while you were doing it?
I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, so it's like read these words correctly.
Yes.
Read it as it should be read.
Yeah, yeah, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're afraid of messing up or screwing up a word, eh?
Yeah, I would say so. A little bit.
One of the newscasts I read years and years ago, I never saw this word before because I grew up in Cape Breton. There were a lot of words I never saw before. And I am in the newscast, and there was this park in the United States, and it's called Yosemite. And I called it Yosemite. And I'll tell you, the newsroom was laughing so hard when I walked out of the studio. It was, what are you laughing so hard for? It's not Yosemite, it's Yosemite. And I thought, no, I didn't know that. So sometimes it happens. You get caught, you know, and sometimes you say a word and you mess it up. But you know, if you don't lighten up about it, you drive yourself crazy. There's tons of words like that in the English language. Twist your tongue up, eh? That's why we do tongue twisters, because the tongue twisters open up the mouth and get the tongue working so that your enunciation is much clearer and much more positive. And in your mind, you're saying, okay, I practiced. I'm okay. I'm not going to screw that up. All right, great. Thank you very much, Lee. That was, or Lisa, that was wonderful. I appreciate it. All right, let's move on. I want to move on to a thing now. It's about time, yeah. I want to move on to a thing called putting your speech together. This is the who, what, where, when, and why. The 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and the word how. So, as a journalist, you learn the 5 W's of interviewing people. If you ask anybody a question, what is your name? How are you? Who are you? They can't answer with yes or no. You can always get a response from them. So that was the trick that we used all of the time. And 5 questions basically could occupy a 5-minute interview. So, how long have you been in town? Why are you here? What are some of the works you're going to talk about in your presentation? You see how, and of course, your mind has to, you can't say yes or no, you have to give them an answer no matter what. So the 5 W's are very important in terms of what is it you're setting your audience up for. And I have them written down here. So I'm just going to read them to you, and we'll be able to put them on the screen later for you and send them to you as a connecting sheet, okay? Here are the 6 major questions you should ask yourself about any audience. Number 1, who are they? Are they engineers, architects, poets, writers? What's the group comprised of? Most of the people I did were financial advisors, that sort of people. So they were into money and marketing and that kind of thing. So I knew what the general brain thought was before I went into the room. Why do I want to speak to them? Well, besides the money they paid me, I suppose I wanted to speak to them because I had some tips I could give them for their presentations and some exercises that would help them get out of their head about delivering information about financial advising people. Because there was a period in banks and corporations where they started having the financial advisors doing big presentations in rooms, whereas years before they never did. It was always the head of the board of directors, stuff like that. So anyway, this was very important to them. What form of reasoning would be most compelling to them? Give them something what form of reasoning would be most compelling to them? That's an interesting question. So you'd have to think about that before you went in. Come up with an answer for yourself so that in the back of your mind, you knew why you were there. What evidence should I provide to persuade or inform this particular group? Yeah. So what overheads you're going to use? What am I going to bring to show that what I'm talking about can be supported by evidence? How can I build credibility? Well, that's a tricky one. You can only do it by trying to be as honest and clear and as open as you possibly can for the group that you're delivering the information to. and making sure that you get all the questions that you think are in the minds of the audience answered. And this is very important because I'll give you an example. Today, I was in the parking lot waiting for my daughter to come out of the No Frills grocery store. And as I'm watching people go by, I realized that with the masks on we have here, it's very difficult to see a person's emotion. But I have noticed over the while that reading the eyes like this, you can tell a great deal from people. It's really quite amazing. In the grocery stores, check it out yourself. Look and see a person, whether they're going to be nice to you or not nice to you, whether you should say hi to them or shut your mouth because you can tell by the look in their eye, there's something about it. Because there's a way that they use their eyes to communicate. And you can see behind the mask when somebody's smiling, you can see it. The eyes start to split at the sides. So practice that, because that's a lot of fun, because you can watch people behind the mask and get a sense of their reality. The other thing that I've done most of my life is I love watching people walk. You can tell by somebody's walk, the rhythm of their body, how they're going to approach life. When I'm doing presentations, you know what I do? I sit in the corner and I don't say anything to anyone. I don't say hi or nothing. I just sit there and shut my mouth, because if I do, they're going to know the sound of my voice. So when I come in front of the room, it's a surprise to them when I do that silly voice routine I did for you. So I say nothing to them and I sit there and I watch them. And I watch them coming in, sitting down, and I'm able to tell just by watching them what kind of character they're going to be, whether they're going to be a player or they're going to be cocky, or whether they're going to be this or going to be that. And you can learn a great deal by body language. So this is very important to you if you're doing a presentation. Spend lots of time watching your audience before they say, okay, everybody, put down your wine glasses and cheese plates. We're going to go sit down now, and George is going to do a presentation for you. But in the meantime, you've learned about your audience in the warm-up, shall we say. How can I appeal to the listener's motivations and emotions? You throw it out there, just like a what do you call it? A spinning thing. What's that called? I've forgotten. What is that stupid thing called? What you throw it.
You mean
Frisbee.
a boomerang that comes back?
What's it called?
Frisbee.
Frisbee. That's it. A frisbee. Oh my God, I haven't used one in 50 years. Anyway, so you got a frisbee in your hand. You throw it out, boom, and you watch the audience react to it. And if you get a negative reaction, you bring your frisbee back and say, okay, let's try a different color. And you throw that one out and see what happens. And that's the way it is when you're relating to an audience. You're playing with them in a way of, try this. That didn't work. Okay, try that. That didn't work. That didn't work. And you're watching how the audience is reacting to you. There was a presentation I was doing, I remember, for Nesbitt Burns, and I was in a room of about 30 people. There was a guy up in front of the room, and I was doing the 1 to 10 exercise with him, and he could not get past 4 or 5 in the energy of his volume. And I did everything I could. And all of a sudden, I looked up there and I saw something about his personality. And I walked up this long aisle between the two sections of the room. There were about 30 people in the room. And I walked up the center, and he's standing up in front of the room. And I walked over to him and I said, "What's your name, boy?" And he said, "Sergeant so-and-so, sir." Well, it blew the room wide apart, because this guy was as quiet as a mouse. And the room knew him. They worked with him. And they stood up and they started applauding. "Atta boy, Frankie, you let it go." And what I saw in that character of that person was a military. I don't know why I did that. I just went up and threw it at him. And he bit. And he did the salute. He must have been in cadets or something when he was a kid, but he responded just like a robot. It was like, "Sir," and off he went. And I'll tell you, that was a real breakthrough for him. And when he sat down, he was smiling, and he just felt so proud that he finally let go this energy that he'd been holding inside of him, probably for quite a long time in his life. And that exercise helped him, just that simple little thing. So the next part that I want to talk about, how to put the speech together. Oh yeah, right. That's the number of words. So I mentioned to you, you can write this down if you want. We'll send this out. 150 words takes 1 minute. 8-minute speech is 1,050 words. Okay? So that'll give you a rough scale on how to do something. The other part of it is this, the introduction. Oh, this is the good part. This is the part that I like. An introduction, as some of you may know, can either be a joke or a quote. If you're not a good joke teller, don't tell a joke. And the reason I say that is some people are so bad at telling jokes. So don't try to persuade yourself you're a good comedian when you're not. Just use a quote or something like that, and it'll save you a lot of trouble. So the idea being here, I have these cards. So this card here is my notes for today. And I put it vertically because everything can be, I looked at it quickly and I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mind, but it's enough to stimulate a conversation. And that's really all it is, a conversation between you and me and the gang that are watching right now. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know. The other ones are this, the colored ones. Now what you do is you put your quote or your saying or your joke, if you're a good joke teller, you put that on the blue card. Now it could be green or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But imagine this, if you have a whole bunch of cards like this, and they're all lined up, and then you have your joke in the horizontal position, when you go through all of your cards, you're going to come to the joke, and the joke will be written sideways, and you'll be able to see it right away without hesitating. And by the way, number your cards in case you drop them on the ground, because then you can put them back in order. The other thing to do as well is have 2 copies of it. One for the bag that you take to your presentation or whatever you carry your materials in. Put that package of, say, 10 cards or whatever in the bag. Duplicate it and put it in your pocket or your jacket or your sweater. And the reason is, when you're getting ready to go out and do a presentation, you're going to be running out the door, and halfway there, you're going to go, oh, I forgot my cards. Oh, no, I'm doomed. No, because you have a backup. That's the idea, and it works every time. I've never had to use my backup, but just for the hell of it, I always had an extra one. I had one in my briefcase, and I had a package in the vest of my sport coat or my suit at the time. And I just take them out and put them down. Now, you'll notice an awful lot of presenters, they use ring binders. They come up with a binder and they open up this big thing and, like God's going to come out. Well, and the next thing you know, they're reading word for word. And they move the paper and you can see them doing it. And I don't know about you, but it bores the hell out of me. It just to the point where there's nobody home. They're not sharing information with you because they don't know the information. They're reading it word for word. So get away from the binders if you possibly can. If you have to use sheets of paper and read more than you need to, then do that, but make it just a sheet of paper, a bunch of them together, and don't staple it because then you're going to flip the paper. All the audience sees is you flipping the paper or the ring binder. So keep it nice and simple. Very simple. You bring the cards out and people say, whoa, that's smart. Look at that. He's got all the information right there in the card. Holy Toledo. And don't forget, if you can't see, bring your glasses with you. Otherwise, you're going to go, oh, my glasses. I can't read the cards. Anyway, cover your ass. Make sure you do. Okay, so the introduction is a quote, a joke, or a story. It could be anything. That runs 150 words. 1 minute is long enough to tell the story, like the story I told you about the guy at the back of the room sleeping and I woke him up with a funny voice. A topic sentence. So today I want to talk to you today about public speaking, how you can break the fears that you have between you and your audience so you're able to share some of your experience with the group of people who came to share their time with you. A thesis statement. You could throw out something like this, and a lot of people do it. It's a good one too. I think that today's economy is going to go down the tank. And here's the reason why. Well, boy, you're going to wake them up with that, I'll tell you, and get conversations in their mind. Now, that's the backgrounder. Why I'm talking about that is because I want to tell you about a story about this to give me support for the theme statement or the topic sentence that I mentioned about, the market's going to go down the tubes and here's the reason why. It supports my material. The other parts are point section. Point 1 is 150 words for 1 minute. Point 2, 75 words at a half a minute. Point 3, 75 words at another minute and a half, or half minute rather. And point 4, 150 words for 1 minute. Now, I'll give you a good example. See how the silence works there? I use body language to keep your attention. On my notes here, it says point A, 150 words, 1 minute. Point B, point C, and point D. Well, I said point 1, point 2, and point 3. Well, for some of you, if you went point 1, oh no, it's not point 1, it's point A. I'm sorry, point A. Nah, let it go. Whatever comes out of your mouth, just let it go. Don't go back to correct yourself, because it's the worst thing you can do. Because if you spend all of your time, unless you're reading a newscast, and you make the wrong pronunciation of the Prime Minister of Canada, then it would be a good idea. Jacques Parizeau is not the Prime Minister, so it would be good to say Justin Trudeau. You see what I'm saying? So if it's that serious, you say, that should read this, and then you read it. But in most cases, just trimple on through. I remember I was reading a newscast once, and I could not pronounce this word for the life of me. It was something like misanthrope. And I looked at it, and I couldn't get it, and I couldn't get it. And finally I said, you know what I mean. And I moved on. Well, I went out to the newsroom, and they laughed like hell at that one too. But it got their attention. The mistake got the attention. It's quite fascinating. But we never got any calls saying, what did he say? He screwed that up. Nah, they don't care. They're just listening to the information. They don't care about pronunciation as much. Okay, so the highlights of your presentation. So we go from tell them what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them in the point form I just mentioned, and then your conclusion is you tell them what you told them. So today, we were practicing the art of public speaking. I'm looking at my mother's clock here, and I have 9 minutes to go. So there we go. Now watch how I stretch it out, because I can talk about tons of things. So the main conclusion is the main point summary. I talked today about diaphragmatic breathing. I also talked today about using articulation and enunciation, and also using poetry for rhymes and that sort of thing. Anything to keep your mind going with any kind of an exercise, and the use of voice and the singing and humming. Humming is so much fun. And here's another one that I forgot about. It's called whistling. If you can whistle, you have to take a diaphragmatic breath to whistle. And here's the other thing. If you open your mouth before you take a breath, it goes instantly into the diaphragm. Just try it right now. Take a breath on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Open your mouth. Take a breath. It goes right in. Notice that? It's a good way to practice. The other good way to practice is this. Take a book, lie on the bed. Don't bother with the floor. You're too old for that anyway. I don't do that anymore. Lie in the bed, get a book, like a dictionary or whatever, put it on your diaphragm, and watch your diaphragm lift the book off your diaphragm. You breathe into the diaphragm, the book rises, and then the book goes down. The book rises and the book goes down. So do that, and that's a nice way to develop your diaphragmatic breath and to build your muscle. And it doesn't take long. I would say probably 2 or 3 weeks. You'd be able to breathe totally differently. And here's the other thing that's going to happen. And it's going to happen to LeeLa. When LeeLa practices more of the diaphragmatic breathing, what's going to happen is the rhythm of her voice is going to change, because we only speak with the amount of air that we have in the breath. And that changes people's inflection patterns. So you watch the next time we do an episode here, 10 years from now, LeeLa will be breathing and speaking differently, because she's caught on to the trick of speaking to the rhythm of the voice and the natural sound of the ups and downs like a wave on the ocean. And after a while, it becomes so simple that you can just speak and sing and do whatever you want, because you know you've got the breath to do it, because that's the secret of the game. So, where was I here? Oh yeah, right. So we're going to do the diaphragmatic breathing, that's the other thing. And the other part was the using the cards to remember your information. It's the simplest way to do it. Also, Ozymandias is just an example of a breath technique or a device to change your voice in the middle of a presentation. Pick some stuff where there are 4 characters and try 4 different characters at 4 different voice levels. That'll also help you a great deal. The other part too is when you're using the exercises, the 1 to 10, the Ozymandias, try to come up with some stuff for yourself that you like to do. This is just stuff that I found over the years that I've always enjoyed, and I thought that maybe you would enjoy it as well. So in conclusion, I hope that you've enjoyed some of my information. I know you have. Some of you may not have heard it before. Some of you may. But the point is, that's just basically the beginning, because as you get into this game, you're going to find that there's all kinds of different avenues and paths you can take when doing a presentation. And I hope I was able to share some of them with you today. So thank you very much. Girls.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, George. What a fun night for part 2. I definitely learned a lot more, and I know you've been helping us out along the way. So it's great to have you again tonight.
Great.
And now we're going to do our 5 and 5. So 5 questions in roughly 5 minutes. So if you do have any questions for George at this point, you can put them in the chat box and I'll read them out to him. I will start with the first question though. So George,
yes,
you tell everyone how you can stop your mind from talking to you when you're doing a presentation.
The simplest way to do it is speaking louder than your mind is speaking to you. And just as I started that, did you hear me say, In what will happen is your elimination of ahs and ums will start to disappear when you do the diaphragmatic breathing, because if you notice in my presentation, I hardly had any at all. And the reason is ums and ahs come because your mind is saying, what's next? And you go, I think it's, and then you put it out. The is the same idea. So as you practice the diaphragmatic breathing, that will erase the ums and ahs of your life. So pay attention to when you're speaking to people. Notice how many ums and ahs you put into it. I used to have the exercise in class where we would count them. So the students would count when somebody was doing a presentation, how many ums and ahs they did. Not that it's a bad and a wrong, but after a while, when you hear it over and over and over, it becomes a pattern of your speech that you can't break away from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
That's super helpful. Yes.
Okay.
And that's the goal. That's the ultimate goal for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be confident. Okay. So we don't have any questions at this point. So I have 2 more for you.
Good.
How do you suggest to warm up for a presentation? I know you talked about that a little bit, but if you could expand more on that, that would be great.
The way I start, see, I did an there. So you have to train yourself to hear how you speak. What I usually do is I start thinking about it halfway through the day. I got dressed for this presentation. I'll give you an example. I got dressed this afternoon at about 3 o'clock. And as I'm going out with my daughter, she went shopping. I'm in the car rehearsing. I'm doing deep diaphragmatic breaths. I'm going, A-E-I-O-U. And I'm going through all the different exercises and getting warmed up for this evening. Even though I'm 4 hours away, but still I want it to be at a point where when I start, I'm not going to get fatigued. I've been going for almost an hour now. It'll be 2 minutes less than an hour. And the point is that you need a lot of stamina when you're doing presentations. People don't realize that, but it requires a lot of energy because you're up there and you're stressed and you're thinking and you're moving and you're trying to keep your act together. And then when it's over, you go, let's go for a drink. I need a beer. And this is the way the game seems to work anyway. I hope that was helpful.
Definitely. And we do have a question here from Jill.
Yeah.
She says, do you ever get involuntary face/eye twitches or tension when speaking? This question probably feeds into your pre-presentation warm-ups.
Yes, and I never got eye twitches. What would I get? I would get throat tightening. my throat would get tight and I could feel it. It was really quite interesting. I would be doing, especially when I was singing with the group when I was younger, my throat would get tight as all get out, and I had to figure out how to loosen it up. And one of the things I didn't do, and I should mention this too, is for heaven's sake, do not eat before your presentation. You'll be burping and you know what? All through your presentation, at the end of it, you're going to go little burps, and it'll drive you nuts. I haven't eaten yet, so when I'm finished here, I'm going in to have dinner at 8:30 at night. But the point being that if you see a twitch in your body, that's just your mind saying to you, something's out of order. There's something you haven't got a hold of. Now, for me, I knew it was my throat. Look and see what the eye twitch is all about. Maybe you just need glasses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great tip. Oh.
Mom's bell.
There you go.
All right.
Awesome. Okay. And I want you to do this one last thing for us, George.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. Public speaking is
a pain in the arse. No, public speaking, yeah. Public speaking is out of the box. It's the one thing you will do in your life that you can't duplicate. You can't duplicate. You can sit and listen to all the people in the world, but until you get up in front of the room and start projecting your ideas and your concepts, you don't know what it's about until you've arrived. And when you do, you realize what a wonderful privilege it is to enjoy other people's company and share stuff with them, and also to watch people walk out with a smile on their face, feeling as though they've learned something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's for me anyway, yeah.
Yes. And before I pass it over to Lee, Elaine says, PowerPoint artifacts and other impediments sometimes get in the way of words coming out when the audience wants to go down a different pathway midstream.
Yes, they certainly do. They absolutely do. And this is why it's very important to practice your overheads, any technology you're using. And I come back to the theory of the night that I was in the room when the power went out and everybody had flashlights and candles on and the presentation continued, but the presenter didn't have overheads. So that must have blown that person's mind. So keep that in mind when you're using your phones. Do not use your phones as your source of information, because if you lose your Wi-Fi, you lose everything. You're just naked there in front of the room. What are you going to do, you know? So put everything on the old cards. It'll save your bacon when you least expect it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, George.
Okay.
Now for our closing intention, over to you, Lee.
Thanks so much, George. That was amazing. Appreciate yet again an incredible evening of learning how to speak with confidence. And we're now going to do our closing intentions. So if everyone can just shut your eyes. As we close our time together with gratitude to all, we pause to offer each other love and kindness. May our understanding of love be expanded by what we have shared as we open ourselves to growth. May we rest in trust and surrender ourselves and our paths to divine grace, asking that this time together be protected, corrected, and held high. May we now see through love's eyes and understand beyond words. May we all be safe, happy, and healthy. May we all rest in full joy and know that there is no distance between friends in time or space. Divine strength and peace surround us until we meet again. You can open your eyes. And now for our final announcements, over to Lisa. Lisa?
Thanks so much again, George, for the session tonight. We covered voice power and clarity, speech preparation, and tools to support your presentation, like George's cards. Our next LeeLa event is going to be Wednesday, December 2nd, and our special guest will be Christine Carr, who's a registered nutritionist. She will discuss all things immune health, covering specifically what foods, supplements, and lifestyle recommendations can keep you healthy during the holiday season coming up. You can register online for that. And until next time, everyone, be well, aloha, and good night.